Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Kerry Hatley of Stopping Fights Very Badly. Jack Slack, it's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday the 4th of December. We're legally allowed to start playing Christmas music. Coming at you off a UFC exclusive weekend. I mean, I don't really care about Ryan Garcia beating someone, but basically the UFC was the only thing going on this weekend. It was a fairly strong looking card on paper. We said it looked quite good. They were in Austin, so they had to try because they were selling tickets. And we had a couple of really good competitive matchups on there. Some very impressive performances in said matchups. And wider implications for the winners, which is always good. Your main event was Arman Tsarukyan versus Beneil Dariush. Before we get started, obviously, I wrote a post-fight breakdown on Sunday, like I always do. I'm just a machine. I get up, I watch the fights, I break them down. In the breakdown I did main event, co-main, Jaylen Turner blew my tits off, so I did a big thing on him. Figueiredo versus Font. Touched on Brady versus Gastelum, but only for something weird Gastelum did. And touched on Silva versus Guida too. So not a bad spread, not just... can't get 1,000 words out of one exchange in the main event. But I'm going to now, talking about it. But do go and read that article because it was a pretty good one. And there was some really fun stuff on this card. And if you want to get real technical, which we're gonna, but I'm going to be talking about Jaylen Turner's double jab and his dart later. And you're probably going to want some diagrams of that. So go check out the article. Plug done. Let's talk about these fights. Arman Tsarukyan versus Beneil Dariush. Great matchup between two. Was Tsarukyan top 10? They should both be top... I mean, I consider them both top 10, but then I don't really consider like Michael Chandler top 10, and he is apparently top 10. I said after this happened, massive result for Michael Chandler to pretend not to have seen. But Dariush and Tsarukyan are part of the meritocracy part of the lightweight division that isn't Poirier, Gaethje, and Chandler. And this is easily Arman Tsarukyan's biggest win. What's hilarious is the combination that finished the fight and started the fight. I'd been talking about on the Boycast and saying, yeah, Beneil Dariush did this really nice overhand to knee and then double collar tie and threatened the knees entry against Edson Barboza and Drakkar Klose. He's a few inches taller than Tsarukyan. I'd really like to see him use that here to threaten the knees from the double collar tie. When you've got a shorter opponent, particularly one who likes ducking. You know, I've mentioned it a dozen times now, but Islam Makhachev, both fights with Volkanovski, anytime Volkanovski's head comes slightly low, anytime Volkanovski's exiting a clinch and ducking forward, Makhachev goes both hands behind the head and threatens to knee him in the head or turn over an elbow. So I spent about 5 minutes on the Boycast saying, yeah, I really like that, and it would be really effective to use against Arman Tsarukyan, and then he can build off it, because obviously Dariush is very strong in the clinch. And Arman Tsarukyan came out and did it to Dariush instead. And he had a couple of inches of disadvantage in height and still made it work. Tsarukyan's orthodox, Dariush is southpaw, so it's an overhand right from Tsarukyan. He jabs, he steps outside the lead foot, takes outside foot position, swings in a wide right around the side, really more around the side than over the top. A wide swing more than an overhand. But it's there to like get Dariush's guard up, but it manages to go behind Dariush's guard and actually hit him. Didn't seem to do an awful lot of... didn't seem to move him a lot, the blow. But you'll see people get hit with these ones. I mean, Poirier versus McGregor 1's a great example. Poirier kept carrying his lead elbow so high to deal with the left straight of Conor McGregor, because they're both southpaws, that McGregor just swung around the side of it. And you typically have to step a bit deeper to do that. But what you can do, if the guy puts his double forearms up, is reach forward and grab their head immediately off it. Now, Dariush, when he was doing it to Barboza, and I think against Klose, he threw the overhand and then he threw the left knee underneath it, which is a real slick combination. Is it a combination if it's only two strikes and they both happen basically at the same time? But you'll see Saenchai do it in his prime, and also in those like sparring tours of the US. He does it in every little sparring session. He's in southpaw, so he goes overhand left and left knee to the body, because guys bring their right arm up to deal with the overhand, and you just slot the knee in underneath. And then you come down and you grab the head. Obviously, grabbing the head in MMA, much more effective than in Muay Thai, where people are actually, the moment you get close, they're postured up. They know that you're going to try and clinch and use knees and things. They're shrugging their shoulders. They're reaching over your arms. They're trying to stuff you. MMA, there's a lot going on. And Dariush actually drops his head while this is happening, and then Tsarukyan gets his head, throws a knee. The crazy part is that Dariush stood up in time to take the stank off the knee. and then got hit by a short right hand from Tsarukyan. People were losing their shit over this. They're like, oh, throwing the same hand off the knee. That's so clever. I can't believe he thought of that. And I'm like, go watch some Errol Zimmerman. He was a big heavyweight kickboxer who, aside from this one setup, sucked. But he used to throw a real, like, parallel to the floor right hook, swinging his backhand in from the side and then bring a knee up the center, or throw the knee and then throw the right hook. And he did that one, or I suppose it's two combinations against everyone. Had mad success with it. Go look up an Errol Zimmerman highlight. That right knee and then as the leg comes down, swinging the right hook. So much fun. Real good feeling combination if you want to go try it on the bag or have your wife hold a pillow from the couch, as Anderson Silva did when he was practicing his back elbow. Dariush went down like a sack of shit. Tsarukyan swarmed on top, got the finish. 1 minute, almost nothing thrown. There was a little bit of jabbing. Dariush threw a couple of left kicks. Tsarukyan just kept circling past his lead leg, which, while it's, you can't look too much into the early going of this fight and extrapolate, that's a good tactic against Beneil Dariush because so much of his offense comes off one side. It's all left overhand, left straight, left round kick. Doesn't really throw the right round kick much, doesn't step up into kicks much. Throws a good jab, but it's very straight. Doesn't really use his right hook very much at all, except on the counter, and he really waits for you to come in for that. It's something we're going to talk about with Puna Soriano later, but there are very one-handed fighters like Dan Henderson, and you'll say, look, the way that he stands basically gives him access to one hand, really loads up one hand, it doesn't give him a lot with the other. So Henderson was very right-hand heavy. He was orthodox. He stood almost side on to load up his right hand. He did knock down Wanderlei Silva with a left hook, and then people were like, well, yes, he does have a left hook. And if you made that criticism that he was very one-handed, they'd say, well, look at the left hook. But the left hook came after he threw his right hand. He loaded up his hips. It's that he didn't have access to the left hook from his stance. Ideally, what you want is to have almost everything coming off your stance. There are what's called secondary techniques. So, like, if you stand more square, you might throw an inside. This is a Zhang Weili thing. You throw an inside low kick with your lead leg, and when you miss, you're bladed. So you can do a spinning back kick, or you can do a step up side kick. Moves that you didn't have access to before, but really you want as much of the stuff that you like doing accessible from your stance. And you want to have threats from both sides of your body. Beneil Dariush doesn't really have a lot from his right to stop people circling to his right, which we're going to talk about in a second with Rob Font, who just was absolutely hopeless in his fight. But yeah, big props to Tsarukyan. Big finish for him. Big name for him. I don't know if they're lining up Oliveira for another shot at Makhachev because he pulled out of the last one. But I think Tsarukyan versus Makhachev makes a lot of sense. I know there's people who are like, oh, I need to see Makhachev versus the winner of Leon versus Colby. But I'm like, no, I want to see Makhachev versus the really competitive lightweights of this division. And this is a guy who had a really competitive fight with him the first time round. You either get a guy who's, both of them have gotten better since. So you either get a guy who's seen him once before and isn't scared of him and really puts it on him, or you get a chance to see Islam Makhachev come back even better in the rematch. And you don't hold up two divisions doing dumb double champ shit. Co-main event was Jaylen Turner versus Bobby Green. This was the performance of the night in my eyes. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Jaylen Turner, really composed. And it really stands out, actually. He's so much better than when he fought Vicente Luque back in the day at welterweight. But he's tall and long for a lightweight, which are advantages that some people get really mad about. Normally, height sells on the internet, but to use those advantages well is very tricky. And, I was listening to Heavy Hands before the fights, and they were talking about how Jaylen Turner stays on top of his feet, and there couldn't have been a better example of that than this fight. Bobby Green loves slipping and sliding. Loves slipping, dipping, shoulder rolling, getting out of the way of punches that way. That's a unique challenge because not a lot of people are good at that in MMA. But there are ways to punish people for the things they do, not just like try and diffuse them. So Jaylen Turner's double jab was immediately successful for him. He throws out a double jab and Bobby Green pulls from the first one, does a deep slip and tries to parry the second one, swings back. Jaylen Turner's not quite close enough. And then Bobby Green's out of position and Jaylen Turner's probably close enough that he could hit him if he went for him. But Jaylen Turner just sort of faints and then comes back to position. But just from that first early exchange, you could see Jaylen Turner working out what Bobby Green's going to do. Because people don't have, there are only so many ways to slip a punch. There are only so many ways to throw counters off each slip or evasion or parry you do. Bobby Green's really While he's weird, he only does a few things. He does that shifting left hand where he gets on the ball of his back foot and throws himself forward. He does that front kick because by getting on the ball of his back foot to throw himself forward, he also does sort of like a hip fake for his front kick, so he can pair those two off with each other. And then he does like slips into right hooks. But then there was Turner's jab when he threw his rear hand from both stances, because both these lads switch. He throws a 1-2 or whatever, and then he darts out to the side so that if you throw your rear hand, throw your straight with your right hand if you're orthodox, your right foot comes up to where your left foot is, like heel to heel, and your left foot kicks out to the side. So you end up at 90 degrees from the guy. So what happened was the green slipped the left straight or right straight or whatever it was, and before he could come back, Jaylen Turner was off on an angle, and Bobby Green had to turn to face him, which is great. And then you saw both things come together in the finish. He double jabs in, Bobby Green slips, he hits him with a right straight in the slip, so it's a right straight not in front of Jaylen Turner's centre line like you would in shadow boxing or you're taught to on the bag. It was a right straight to where Bobby Green's head was. Caught him on the side of the jaw. Exactly like that is, what's it called? What's his name? Ikram Aliskerov did to Phil Hawes. Caught him deep in the slip. But then Jaylen Turner gets down behind the shoulder on the same hand he's just punched with, so he doesn't need the counter. And then he darts out to a safe position, which would have kept him safe from further returns had Bobby Green not had everything shaken up. And Turner hops out to a different stance and then realises, oh shit, I've rocked him, and goes in and does exactly the same thing again. Shows the jab, Bobby Green slips, he hits him with a right straight in his new position. Dude looked fantastic. And then there was other little things he was doing to play off the Bobby Green game as well. If you've got a guy who's going to slip from your punches and duck low, throw a couple of high kicks. Jaylen Turner did. You've got a guy who's going to stand in a wide stance, and watch the very first exchange of this fight. Bobby Green comes out in his normal stance with his hands low down by his chest, and his back foot is flat on the floor and pointing outwards. Forward and 45 is like the classic expression for sort of a neutral stance. Your lead foot points forward, your rear foot points 45 degrees out to the side. When he wants to leap in with that left hand, the one where he throws his whole body behind it, he gets up on the ball of his back foot. He often brings it in behind him so that he's standing almost on a line. And he does that right at the start and leaps in as Jaylen Turner kicks his lead leg. And Jaylen Turner's low kicks in this one really worked to pick at Bobby when he went into a longer stance to preempt jumping forwards. What I got from this fight was that I really want to write just a couple of studies of both these guys and their styles. Or maybe do a Filthy Casuals guide on one or both. But man, so impressed with Turner. And in my article, which I spent a long time just fluffing him up, I didn't get a chance to have a good moan about this stoppage. Unbelievable. Kerry Hatley, what the fuck was he doing? You know, Bobby Green gets rocked once, gets dropped after that, and then Jaylen Turner's on top of him, like mounted but on his back. The worst position in MMA, particularly when the bottom guy's flat. Bobby Green can't build up to his hands and knees, so he's just laying there getting punched in the back of the head, or, you know, in the head but from behind. And Kerry Hatley allows him to take like 20 blows. It's unbelievable. And even the commentators who are very like, I mean, Bisping went out of his way to be like, oh, Kerry Hatley's done some good stoppages in the past. It was DC and Bisping on commentary for this one, the worst combination. They're just so bad with each other and for each other. Love Bisping on his own. DC, when he's got Laura Sanko there, keeping him in line. But man, they were all over the place on this one. And so some of the people after this were like, well, that's the end of Kerry Hatley's reffing career, or UFC reffing career. It's like, really? I mean, it happened to that one Russian dude who let Zaleski beat the shit out of Benoit Saint-Denis. And was it Yamasaki who finally quit when he let Valentina Shevchenko beat the stuffing out of Priscilla Cachoeira? But he's back now. But Herb Dean makes horrible stoppages all the time. Mark Smith makes horrible stoppages all the time. Mark Smith made one. If you had never seen, who was it? Was it Nasrat Haqparast versus Drew Dober? Let me check if they've fought. Yeah, Dober knocks him down, and Haqparast's flat on his face, and Dober hits him like 10 more times. And while he's doing it, Mark Smith shouts, "Fight back!" at the motionless corpse of Nasrat Haqparast. But I thought, how weird must it be for Dan Hardy, who I presume was there. They didn't used to let him corner because he had such a bad breakup with the UFC. But he was there with his wife, Veronica Hardy, formerly Veronica Macedo, and acting as part of her team. He lost his job with the UFC for going off at Herb Dean about a terrible stoppage when he let Francisco Trinaldo knock out Jai Herbert, stand over him being like, ref, and then hit him like several more times on the floor while he was doing the fencing thing where his arms are just out straight above him. And Hardy shouting at him lost Hardy his commentary gig, which is a shame because Hardy was one of the good ones. So it must have been weird for him watching this, especially with DC there going like, that was really bad. But just to remind everyone, Herb Dean never came out and said that he got that one wrong. In fact, he came out afterwards and said he got it right, which is so obviously wrong. It's a hard job. I don't mind people making mistakes. Even the best ref in the world, Jason Herzog, official referee of the Jack Slag podcast, makes mistakes. He let Anthony Smith get beaten half to death by Glover Teixeira. So did Anthony Smith's corner, to be fair. But afterwards, he came out and he said, I think I got that one wrong. He did like an open letter just saying, I think I got that one wrong, and I will strive to be better off that. Herb Dean has to defend every wrong decision he's ever made. But yeah, fire that man. Never need to see him again. Truly dreadful. Career worst. Well, I hope career worst stoppage. One of the worst stoppages I've ever seen in the UFC. As always, I would much rather early stoppages than late stoppages. Deiveson Figueiredo versus Rob Font. This was a weird one because Deiveson Figueiredo definitely looked better than I expected at bantamweight. Power held up. Looked strong. Wrestling looks better than ever, technically. But he also fought a Rob Font who has lost the mojo. This dude used to throw body shots and low kicks in abundance. He was a great volume striker who worked up and down the body. He entirely threw to the head in this fight. He threw 6 body shots and landed 5. He threw 3 leg kicks and landed 2. And if you watch the fight, those are just stats from Fight Metric, but if you watch the fight, I counted like 2 body shots and 1 low kick, and they all landed well, and he still didn't go back to them. And I've had people being like, oh, he was scared of the uppercut or whatever, but he was doing jab and dip, but without the jab. He was scared to jab. Well, let's get into this. The Rob Font jab has always been a big part of his game. Came out and flicked it a couple of times. I thought it would be really useful for him here because if he could, particularly, exactly because of the reasons that I said, that we just talked about in the Jaylen Turner Bobby Green fight. Deiveson Figueiredo waits for you to jab, pulls, and then throws a right hand counter or ducks in on your legs. It's a big move he's been doing all through his career. If you get him to pull and you're not close enough to hit, if you get him, reacting to stuff that's not quite there, you can catch him in his when he's out of position or as he comes back in. Problem was Rob Font came out, flicked a jab, and Deiveson Figueiredo immediately threw a cross counter, a right hand across the top, which is perfect. We talked about this loads with Robbie Lawler versus Matt Brown. It's like, if you're worried about something someone's going to do, hit them as hard as you can right off the bat. And then hopefully they go, oh, I'm not trying that again. Because Rob Font then tried to fight like he normally does, but without his jab, which was insane. There's loads of examples of him going, he brings his hands up high, he steps in as if he's going to jab, doesn't jab, and then ducks. Now, if he jabbed and then dipped, that would be one thing, but he doesn't jab at all. He just steps in like he's going to jab, and after like 2 or 3 fakes, Figueiredo knows that the real jab isn't coming. So Figueiredo spent a lot of time devoting himself to like uppercutting Rob Font as he ducked, and this is why I was saying, like, people were telling me, oh, he wasn't throwing body shots or low kicks because he was worried about that uppercut. No, if you were worried about the uppercut, you wouldn't be ducking in on every attack. Playing amateur psychologist here, but Rob Font, in his fight with Adrian Yanez, which basically reinvigorated his career after some rough losses, he got dinged up, and then he came back with the right hand and like collar tie, grabbing behind the head and finishing him with the right hand. I think the lesson he took away was that he should throw his right hand at the head as often as possible and count on his power. Problem is, there's no arguing with this. This is not over him at heavyweight where people are like, no one can really take the punches of heavyweights consistently. Rob Font has a bad chin. Rob Font gets wobbled quite a lot, and he gets wobbled with like 1 punch around when he's winning the whole round. He's a fragile fighter. They exist. They have had success. But then he's decided that he's going to be like a glass cannon with his right hand and he's going to bang people out there. He was the softer hitter in this fight and the more fragile fighter. Trying to like just land the right hand to the head as often as he could was not a good path to victory for him here. And Figueiredo, in addition to outbanging him on the feet, was actually doing some really nice wrestling and stuff too. I spoke about it in the post-fight article, but like this dude used to just have like a crazy athletic double leg that he'd occasionally hit on people by slipping back and coming underneath their jab, and an inside trip from the clinch, which every Brazilian has. This one, he hits a trap hook dump. He gets a single leg and runs the pipe on it. He does a beautiful, from an over-under clinch, he runs Font towards the fence, but trips one of his feet, like foot sweeps him on with one leg at the same time, and then gets a knee tap off that. Crazy variety and really good technical looks. But on the ground, Rob Font, his guard was good enough that Figueiredo couldn't really do anything. There's some really nice examples, like in was it the second round or the first round? Figueiredo takes him down into half guard. Rob Font gets the underhook and grabs Figueiredo's other wrist so that Figueiredo can't hit him or control his bottom wrist, because the bottom wrist is the one or bottom hand is the one that you're going to get up on. And then Rob Font just changes off into a Lucas Lech style half guard and comes up with almost no resistance because Figueiredo's completely out of position. He's finishing these lovely takedowns and then doing nothing with it. In the first round, the first takedown, he took him down and immediately got elevated with a butterfly sweep back to his feet. It was only in the third round, once Rob Font had been dinged on the feet quite a lot and was getting tired, that Deiveson Figueiredo was able to move to mount and make it very hard for him in the last few minutes of that fight. But to fight Deiveson Figueiredo, knowing what we know about Deiveson Figueiredo, or studying any fight that he's lost, the Brandon Moreno ones, to not low kick him is insane. And Rob Font threw one low kick and it landed perfectly. He didn't get countered for it, wasn't made to pay off it. To not throw body shots against a guy who always had a pretty low output because he's a big hitter in a small weight class and throws his whole body behind things is a massive oversight. There was some cool uppercut work that Figgy did that I talked about in the article. There's an uppercut that's sort of finding prominence in MMA at the moment, which is like think of an uppercut like a Mike Tyson style uppercut where your wrist is towards you, and you throw the punch up at the ring lights. This is sort of like an uppercut that goes straight towards the opponent. So your palm's pointing up and your wrist points at the ceiling, and then you drive your hand forwards and your wrist is pointing at the ceiling the entire time rather than pointing back at you. You see it quite often, not often enough that we need to call it like an undercut or a thruster cut or an underhanded straight or whatever. But it's out there. Kopylov did it against Puna Soriano. There was a really good one last week that I talked about. Figgy did it this time against Rob, because Rob kept faking the jab and then ducking, and Figueiredo just goes, whop, smacks him on the chin immediately. Uppercut's always great because you can get the underhook off them, as Bisping talked about during the broadcast. Figgy looked great. Rob Font looked bad. The ring cutting was the really insane thing. Rob Font's so focused on his right hand that he's just chasing Figgy around the ring. They were talking about Figgy's amazing footwork. All Figgy was doing was circling in one direction, and Rob Font would run not to where Figgy's going to go, which is how you cut the fucking ring. He'd run straight at where Figgy was at the moment that he decided he was going to attack. So Figgy's already in motion, but he's like, I'm going. And he runs straight at the fence. And there's like 8 or 9 examples of that in this fight. It's crazy. I mean, I tweeted 3 of them, I think. To be that bad at cutting the ring, to be that bad at following up, to be that right hand heavy and not be able to use it to cut the ring is crazy, because he was circling towards the right hand. So your problem is that he's getting overextended. So you've got to step across and meet him. Use like a wide right to the body. Use a right body kick. Use a right low kick. Use a right high kick. You got weapons to cut the ring on him. But he didn't. He just like ran up through a right straight, missed, and then was left with nothing to follow up because Figgy was already on the other side of the ring. Truly a baffling performance, because Rob Font is someone that I used to be very excited for. I remember back in the day when he did he come through the Contender Series? I think it was his first fight in the UFC. Someone was on my Facebook feed saying like, yeah, I sparred him a year ago, and I'd never heard of him, but I was blown away by this guy who works the body, has a beautiful jab, incredible speed, hits like his hands are made of bricks, hard to hit back. And yeah, I mean, Rob Font was really impressive for quite a while. But he seems to have taken the lesson from the Yanez fight that he's a banger who's got that dog in him, and he's not. He is, when he uses other techniques, he's a great technician with great variety, and he should be using that. He's the kind of fighter who has a good enough low kick, a good enough body jab, a good enough jab, a good enough right hook, a good enough right straight that you could slot together a game plan based on what the opponent does. And this game plan was just, I'm going to throw my right hand, and then I'm going to grab his head with my left hand and throw right hands at my left hand. I'm going to hockey punch him to death. And that worked against Yanez basically because he got lucky. Sean Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum was a snoozer, as Sean Brady fights are wont to be. I mean, it was very impressive, but I talked about the Gazzoni, which I almost called a Gazzuli just then. There's the reversal that Kelvin Gastelum hit in the first round. I wrote about it in the article. Go check it out. Old school wrestling technique, the head catch Gazzoni. typically done from a short sit, but you'll see it more and more nowadays in no-gi grappling and MMA, done from giving up your back or escaping the back, rather. But that was the one cool thing that Kelvin Gastelum did, unfortunately, in that fight. Looked very slow. I thought the crazy thing was, this guy's a southpaw. He gets by on his speed and getting in quickly with a good straight, left straight, or a right hook left straight, or a right jab left straight, or occasionally a left straight right hook. It's very basic what he does. He's just very quick and surprises people. What was crazy was that he was doing nothing to control Sean Brady's lead hand. So on two instances, and he was throwing himself so far off balance when he came in with the left straight after his, on his 1-2 or after his right hook left straight. On two occasions in this fight, he dives in at Sean Brady, not dealing with Sean Brady's lead hand at all, dropping his own lead hand, and Sean Brady pokes him with a jab that stumbles Gastelum off his feet. And that's not because, Gastelum's always had a great chin. Maybe his chin's degraded a bit, but it's mainly because he was, one, off balance, and two, didn't do anything about Sean Brady's lead hand. Definitely a sign that he's slowing down, that like these rushes didn't catch Sean Brady out at all, and they used to catch people like Michael Bisping, Vitor Belfort, guys who used to be very quick, but obviously a lot of Kelvin Gastelum's best fights have been against old men. This dude just desperately needs some variety, and he attempted some variety in this fight by throwing weird low kicks to the shin and knee that immediately got him taken down. There are ways to kick safely against wrestlers, and the calf kick done well is absolutely one of them, but he was doing some really weird shit, like picking up his lead leg like he's Bangkok already. Very strange fight. But good for Sean Brady. Lovely Kimura to finish it. Passed the half guard with the Kimura and then stepped over the head. Very hard to get out of that if you're Kelvin Gastelum once your hand has cleared the line of your body. If your hand is in front of your body in a Kimura, you're normally okay, especially because you're allowed to grab your own shorts and you can just let him tear him to pieces in MMA. But once his hand was on the mat, he was a bit fucked, especially once Brady stepped over the head and lifted him up, because as soon as your back's not on the mat but your hand is behind your back, that's when the pressure comes on. If you don't step over the head and lift them up to finish the Kimura, you're trying to Kimura them into the mat. You're trying to put their hand into the mat, which doesn't really work that well. You have to try and crumple it up under their arm. If you lift them off the mat, it's very bad for them. Go look at the old photo of Kimura finishing the Kimura, or what's it called? Something Udigarami. Twisting Udigarami. On Helio Gracie back in the day. Steps over his head, lifts him up, has all that distance to go. The kind to cause a spiral fracture, which are really bad. Big Nog versus Frank Mir, another example of this. You don't see a lot of Kimuras finished nowadays. It's more of it's a grip that allows you to do other stuff. Ryan Hall always called it a gun to your head. It's a dilemma. If they open their hands to try and come up into you or whatever, you put the hand behind their back and you can finish the Kimura. But you'll see people use it to pass the guard. You'll see people use it to take the back. You'll see people use it from the back to move to arm bars and things. But this reminded me a lot of Paulo Filho back in the day. He used to use the Kimura to pass guard quite regularly in Pride. Was he welterweight or middleweight? I think he was Pride welterweight, but that is middleweight. But yeah, if you've never seen Paulo Filho back in the day, that's one that people don't really bring up too much, but he was impressive. He was a specimen because he just got mount and armbarred everyone. Real weird way to finish. I mean, obviously Ronda Rousey did that later on. For a while, he looked absolutely unstoppable, and then he had some drug addiction problems, and he ended up having a fight with Chael Sonnen in WEC, where I think Chael Sonnen won his belt from him. And there are moments when Chael Sonnen moves, circles the cage, and Paulo Filho will be looking at where Chael Sonnen was standing. It's so weird. It's like he's fighting a ghost. But yeah, smothering grappler in the welterweight division, Sean Brady. Good luck to him. Hope he gets some more fights in soon. That division is so stagnant. Dudes are just not fighting. Joaquim Silva versus Clay Guida was a banger. As much as Clay Guida fights can be, but really good use of the inside reach by Clay Guida, which is your hand goes to the inside of their thigh behind their knee, and you catch their leg. And if you push them back, or they're stepping back, that leg gets light and you pick it up. It's the easiest way in the world to get a single, particularly in MMA where you don't want to level change and shoot for things. We talked about Mackenzie Dern actually did a good one against Jessica Andrade, even though most of the time she looked absolutely awful. She did throw a lovely 1-2 and then stepped across and threw like a left hook but with her arm open to the inside of Jessica Andrade's lead leg and picked it up. Frankie Edgar Frankie Edgar used to use the outside reach combined with a posting hand on the chest or shoulder. But Clay Guida was doing that here. So he'd slap the inside of the thigh and come over the top of the overhand. that thing that weird dude on Twitter this week was like, "How can't believe this works in MMA," about Jiri slapping the inside of the thigh and throwing the uppercut against Pereira. Oh no, what was it? This has no business. This technique has no business working in MMA. People just linked the clip of Chad Mendes almost taking Aldo's head off with it, because if you slap the leg and they pull it back, you can. A lot of times their head comes forward and you can just uppercut their head off like a Pez dispenser. But in this one, Guida, he throws an overhand, hits Joaquin Silva on the chin. Guida is not much of a hitter, but he hits him on the chin, and then he slaps the inside of the thigh to try and get the leg. And Silva is hit by the punch and then pulls his leg back away and falls over as a result. And it looks like a knockdown, but it's like he was hit at the chin and then pulled his leg back to get away from Guida. But I was going to say in a boxing match, if you call it a knockdown, but you obviously can't slap the legs in a boxing match. But it was really interesting. And then there's a great double pump high kick that he used, that Silva did in the third round. He switch stepped for a high kick and then paused. And Guida went, "Oh my God," went to block it. And then just as he was like, "Okay, I've been faked," and started coming back to his regular position, Silva kicked for real. We're always talking about that, doing half the move. We always talk about it with the jab. We talked about it with Morgan Charrier using the front kick. He did half the move, waited a beat, and then completed the move. And obviously you lose a bit of the momentum, a bit of the power on it, but you do get the guy out of position and then returning to his guard. And that's the least likely time that he's going to be able to stop you from doing something. I really liked Joaquin Silva's left uppercut in this one, and Figgy's actually in the Font fight. And also Wellington Thurman was doing this as well. 3 guys on this card throwing the right straight at a guy that they know wants to level change, and then throwing a left uppercut with their elbow to their body, real tight. A shovel hook, if you will, a term that I hate using because it's so specific. There's so few instances you can actually call it a shovel hook. But if you've got your elbow tight against your body and you throw an uppercut like that, people sometimes call that a shovel hook. But yeah, by throwing the right hand first and then getting the guy to level change onto the left uppercut, real nice. 3 dudes on this card did that. And then 2 dudes won by slam. What a weird card. A couple of other things I want to talk about that fight. Oh yeah, Silva's lead hand uppercut. And then Clay Guida in the second round, I think it is, he gets a single leg on the fence. He starts to run the pipe and turn Silva off the fence with his head on the inside still. As they turn towards the center of the cage, Silva starts sprawling his legs out. Clay Guida drops to his knees and hits a cutback, which is a really nice finish to a single leg. Who used to do? Oh, Habib used to do them a lot before he did cage wrestling. Way back, if you go watch some of his fights in the ring and on the Sambo mat, he hits a lot of cutbacks off single legs. What else we got? Dustin Stoltzfus versus Punahele Soriano. Puna Soriano, big left hand. I talked about him on the Boycast. I talked about him tons before. Huge talent, won't ever learn to do anything different. But I always mention his fight with Dusko Todorovic because that was one that there's very few fights you could tell exactly how they're going to play out beforehand, and that was one that I got right by being like, Dusko Todorovic will hit him with some nice combinations and then stand there too long and get hit with the overhand left, and he did. And then you watch someone like Kopylov take him apart just by having constant awareness of the overhand left. Every time Kopylov hit him, he was like, and now the left hand's coming. And he'd duck it, or he'd smother it, or he'd counter it. Whereas Dusko Todorovic is a pretty good striker in his own right, but he was like, look how well I'm doing, and then just forgot about the left hand altogether. It's like having a great left hook. It's the great equalizer. There was a nice open side counter in this one, but Soriano is really weird because I think he was a wrestler at school, wasn't he, or something like that? They decently touted wrestler. And I remember he fought Nick Maximov, and he's going into full splits to try and defend takedowns and stuff. But Stoltzfus was easily picking up singles, running to his back, Matt returning him. This is Dustin Stoltzfus, the only man alive to lose to Abus Magomedov. Crazy to lose to him. But Puna Soriano, the cat's out of the bag. I mean, Stoltzfus is not very good, so he was taking the left hand a lot. But anyone competent knows that Soriano only has the one weapon. He's got absolutely nothing coming off the lead hand. And the reason that I said that earlier was because he did actually catch Stoltzfus with his with a right hook after missing his left hand. But for the most part, he's got to throw his left hand before he throws his right hook. It's nothing from his stance. He's not using it. Yeah, terrible, but middleweight generally, pretty terrible. Miesha Tate, didn't watch it. Just don't care about Miesha Tate fights. Cody Brundage versus Zach Reese. Good for Cody Brundage. Gets off his 5-fight losing streak or whatever it was. He got real lucky with, actually, he won the Malkoun fight by getting his ass kicked and then getting elbowed in the back of the head. But he was on a rough run. And man, 2 dudes in a row, Zach Reese and I really like Zach Reese's attempt at like a mirror lock in this one. But Zach Reese and Joe Selecki both slammed while attempting armbars. And it is, it's always funny when people overcomplicate this shit with like self-help book or business school terminology, but sunk cost fallacy is real. It's hard to get an armbar on someone and it can end a fight instantly. If you have one, it's or a triangle, it's very hard to have the wherewithal to say no, let go of it when the guy picks you up. Because if you don't have it for an instant, you're already in the air and you're getting slammed. Great example of Chase Hooper letting go of one the other week. If someone picks up Charles Oliveira, he's not only letting go, but he's getting up. If it isn't trained into you, if it's not something you already have, it's very hard to be in the moment and go, right, come on then. Maybe I've held on this sub a little bit too long while he's picking me up, because you have an instant before they drop you on your head. And I think, it's one of those ones where like the people who don't get caught with it tend to be the ones who can throw away a submission attempt. They have the confidence they'll get it again, but they don't have this thing where they're like, I've got him now, I'm definitely going to finish. They've got to be, it's either there or it's not. I got to let go because he's standing up. At least I'm up to my feet. At least I've got access to his legs. At least whatever. It tends to be the guys who are so surprised that they've actually got the armbar on that they just keep. I mean, the great example is Ricardo Arona's triangle. Ricardo Arona, ADCC world champion, very successful grappler, barely submitted anyone. Not that kind of grappler. More a lay and prayer, more a top guy. Great double leg in jiu-jitsu in the days when people didn't know how to wrestle. Got a triangle on Rampage Jackson, was like, oh my God, I'm going to finish a fight by triangle. All my Brazilian boys are going to be so proud of me. But yeah, that's those 2 slams done. Anything else good on that card? No, not really. It was fine. Well, yeah, most of it was fine. A lot of it was good. Some of it was good. I really enjoyed the main card. Main card was fantastic. Wrote a big article about it. Jaylen Turner, star of the day. Brilliant work by him. Davidson Figueiredo also looked pretty good. Arman Tsarukyan, I mean, looked great, but like, man, there's one of those results where it's like, damn, people are never going to take seriously the idea of a rematch between these two. But Neil Dariush could win his next 6 fights. Arman Tsarukyan could go like 2-2, and they could both be next to each other in the rankings. People are never going to take it seriously again. I always talk about it with the Aldo Swanson rule. If you blow out someone quickly, and they don't have, no one gets any chance to see how your skills match up against each other. Just be like, I already blew him out in 15 seconds. What could he possibly do to me? Anyway, I'm your boy Jack Slack. If you want to read the article, get the boycast, support the podcast, and just be a boy generally, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Ihor Potieria not getting to do his cringe-ass dance, bless.